sermon is my interpretation of various lectures over the past 2 decades that I've received from John Dominic Crossan, one of my favorite teachers, who points out that the first time the word sin is used in the Bible is not Adam and Eve. It's Cain and Abel. And his quip of a quote, and Dom Crossan is great with quippy quotes. He said, sin isn't about sex like Augustine taught. Sin is about violence that escalates. Recall there are 2 creation stories in Genesis. We read the first one where God is called Elohim last Sunday, the 7 days of creation with Sabbath justice as its peak. And the second creation story comes from an earlier time than the first one with a different order to creation and a different meaning because both are true. And the same source tells the story of Adam and Eve, the man and the woman in the Garden of Eden, and their consequence of disobedience. The story is situated between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, present-day Iraq. And we call this place the cradle of civilization at the dawn of civilization, between about 10,000 and 6,000 BCE, when the Neolithic Age and the agricultural revolution occurred. And the story continues today with a description of civilization. Reading from Genesis 4. Now the man knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gained a male child with the help of the Lord. She then bore his brother Abel, and Abel became a keeper of the sheep, and Cain became a tiller of the soil. Ever see the musical Oklahoma? One of the songs is, the farmer and the cowman should be friends. Oh, the farmer and the cowman should be friends. Oh, the farmer and the cowman should be friends. One man pushes the plow, the other one chases the cow, but that's no reason they can't be friends. Now you know why I wasn't in Oklahoma. But again, Oklahoma continues that difference and competition between one that herds animals all over the place and one that plants a farm and wants to build fences. That's Cain and Abel right there. So Adam was a gatherer-hunter because Genesis gives us the whole history of civilization in just a few verses. We go from gatherer-hunter cave dwellers, represented by Adam, to wandering nomad shepherds, represented by Abel, to farmers, fence builders, property owners, represented by Cain. It's the progress of civilization in just a few verses. Genesis continues. In the course of time, Cain brought an offering to the Lord from the fruit of the soil. And Abel, for his part, brought the choicest of the firstlings of his flock. The Lord paid heed to Abel and his offering, but to Cain and his offering, the Lord paid no heed. There are 5 beautiful mosaics from around 1200 in the Middle Ages in the Monreale Cathedral in Palermo, Sicily. Dom's wife, Sarah, photographed these images that we'll be using in the sermon from the Christian cathedral. And the first one shows the offering each brother makes to God. Abel offers his best sheep. Abel offered the fruit of the soil. And God accepts Abel's offering and ignores Cain's. I always wondered, why did they know that? How did they know that God accepted one and not the other? But the larger question is, why did God choose one and not the other? The Hebrew people would later make grain and animal offerings for different occasions, and one wasn't any better than the other. There are many reasons proposed, although the Bible leaves it a mystery. Maybe we might think that God goes against the normalcy of civilization to choose the second born over the first. Cain is born first and should receive more rights as the firstborn, but like so many other times in Genesis and in the Bible, God chooses the lesser, the secondborn. Genesis goes on. Cain was much distressed, and his face fell. And the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you distressed? And why has your face fallen? Surely, if you do right, there is uplift. But if you do not do right, sin crouches at the door. Its urge is toward you, but you can be its master." This is the first time the word sin is used in the Bible. And the metaphor is that sin is like a wild animal couching at your door, waiting to strike and overwhelm you. But God says, you can master sin. Sin does not have to master you. You have the choice. You have the ability. Later, we'll learn that Cain would live in land of Nod, east of Eden. And East of Eden is the title of John Steinbeck's 1952 novel about two twin brothers, Cal and Aaron, who represent Cain and Abel. And my favorite part of the novel is where a character urges Cal that he has a choice. He has control over his family's sin, and he uses the word from the Hebrew in Genesis for timshel. When God says to Cain, timshel, you may overcome sin. And Steinbeck writes, but the Hebrew word, the word timshel, thou mayest overcome sin, gives us a choice. It might be the most important word in the world that says the way is open, that throws it right back on each of us. For if thou mayest is true, then thou mayest not is also true. But Cain chooses the sin of violence. And the story continues. Cain said to his brother Abel, let us go out to the field. And when they were in the field, Cain set upon his brother Abel and killed him. 3 words describe fratricide: and killed him. That's all. 3 words. 3 words describe the execution of Jesus. They crucified him. Sin is the violence of murder, brother against brother. And Cain did not conquer the sin of violence as God said he could. His competition, his humiliation, his exclusion, his anger, his jealousy, whatever you add to that, overwhelmed him like the wild beast of sin couching at the door, ready to strike. And the Lord said to Cain, where is your brother Abel? And he said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? How would you answer that question? Is Cain his brother's keeper, or is Cain his brother's brother? But Cain saying, I don't know where he is. Am I supposed to look after him? You know, these are the first questions in the Bible. In the garden, when the man is hiding from God after gaining the knowledge of good and evil, God walks in the garden in the cool of the evening and asks the first question in the Bible, "Where are you?" And this next question, he asks Cain, "Where is your brother?" And I believe the rest of the Bible asks those two questions of us. Where are you in relation to God? And where are you in relation to your brother, your sister, your neighbor? As Jesus said, the whole teaching of the Bible can be summed up by love God with all your being and love your neighbor as yourself. And that starts with these two questions. Where are you in relationship to God? Where are you in relationship to other people? Then God said to Cain, "What have you done? Hark, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Therefore you shall be more cursed than the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. If you till the soil, the ground, it shall no longer yield its strength to you. You shall become a ceaseless wanderer on the earth." Abel was the wanderer, the shepherd. Now Cain becomes the wanderer. Cain was the farmer, and now the soil won't produce anything. In this mosaic, God is on the left, and the red blood of Abel is calling out for justice from the ground in the middle, and Cain is receiving the consequence of his sin. God says, "Your brother's blood cries to me from the ground for justice. So your consequence will be that you, the propertied farmer, will become the wanderer, and the land will no longer yield crops for you." And Cain said to the Lord, "My punishment is too great to bear. Since you have banished me this day from the soil, and I must avoid your presence and become a restless wanderer on earth, anyone who meets me will kill me." The one who was violent first is worried about the vengeance and violence of others to avenge Abel's death. We expect God to punish Cain by killing him for killing his brother, or to at least allow Abel's tribe to seek retribution with blood for blood. But surprisingly, the Lord said to him, "I promise, if anyone kills Cain, sevenfold vengeance will be taken on him." And the Lord put a mark on Cain, lest anyone who met him should kill him. And Cain left the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. God tries to stop the cycle of vengeance and violence by putting a mark on Cain to protect him. And Cain starts the first city in the land of Nod. Civilization moves on, and so does the progression of violence. And chapter 4 continues, showing 5 generations from Cain down to Lamech, and Lamech has 2 wives. And the first wife, out of the first wife, Ada, comes the son Jabal, the ancestor of those who dwell in tents amid herds. And Lamech and Ada's other son is Jubal, the ancestor of the arts, the lyre, and the pipe. And Lamech's other wife, Zillah, bore the son Tubal-Cain, who brought civilization in with copper and iron ages. And she bore a daughter, Naamah, with no further description given. Are women overlooked here? Or do women not advance the violence of civilization like the men? The text doesn't say, I wonder. But the text does say, Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice. O wives of Lamech, give ear to my speech. I have slain a man for wounding me, and a lad for bruising me. If Cain is avenged sevenfold, then Lamech 77-fold. The fourth mosaic is in Montreal Cathedral. Shows Lamech boasting to the wives. Listen up, ladies. And what does he boast about? About escalating the violence and vengeance cycle. In only 5 generations, our violence has progressed exponentially from one killing to killing a man just for wounding you, a kid just for slapping you, not wounding him back, killing him. And the violence of vengeance has progressed exponentially. If Cain is avenged sevenfold, then I, Lamech, will be avenged 77-fold. Violence, vengeance, exponentially growing. Genesis 4 ends here, with civilization's violence and vengeance growing beyond measure. Murder for being hit, killing 77 as a revenge for killing of one man. Sound familiar? Genesis 4 ends there, but the mosaics don't end there. There's one more mosaic in the cathedral about this story. And since this was done in the Middle Ages, the last piece of art depicts a middle-aged legend that's not in the Bible. This is not in the Bible, but it was a legend in the Middle Ages, and so it's portrayed in the mosaics. It's like we want vengeance and violence, and we don't want Cain off the hook for killing Abel with the consequence of wandering. Cain has to be executed, and the Middle Ages shows that in our human sense. That's not God's justice. That's our seeking justice with violence. So this artist depicts the legend of Lamech becoming blind and being led by his son to go hunting. How you shoot a bow and arrow when you're blind, I don't know, but that doesn't seem to be a question they asked. So when Lamech is led by his son to a brush and hears rustling around there, he shoots his arrow and he kills not a wild animal, but his great-great-great-grandfather Cain, who has the arrow in him. And the legend continues that Lamech is so angry at his son for leading them there, he turns the arrow on him and kills his son. Violence and vengeance growing. Did Genesis 4 get it right? Does the violence of human civilization, our normal way of doing things as human beings, does it grow exponentially over time? Not just a little, but 77 times 7 decades forward? 200,000 years ago, Homo sapiens, human beings, began migrating all over the world. And with our migration, we brought an escalation of violence that threatens our environment, other species, our own humanity with extinction. At the time these stories were told and written down, only God could destroy the world. And God promised never to destroy the creation God calls very good. At the dawn of civilization, in the cradle of civilization, 6,000 BC storytellers never imagined human beings would grow in violence to be able to destroy the world by ourselves. But what began with Cain grew to Lamech and continued to grow. By 2600 BCE, we have the story told in this battle mosaic from Ur and Sumer. You see the king in the middle at the top of the pyramid, in the center, with his attendants to the left and slaves to the right. At the far left is his chariot with an attendant, but no warrior. And in the middle section, on the left, are the armed guards taking the violently conquered slaves away after the battle. And the bottom panel is how they won the violent victory. 5,000 years ago, the weapons of violence had developed. You see two large asses, each pulling a four-wheeled chariot with a driver and a spearman in each chariot, and they're running roughshod over the enemy. That was the leap of violence from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age, to two-wheeled chariots to four-wheeled chariots with spears. And as Dom Crossan teaches, and it's his way of putting it, not that this truth could be distorted with alternative facts, but from that mosaic, 2600 BC, it only took 4,500 years for our escalation of violence to go from war chariots to Sherman tanks. And it only took 3,000 years to get from iron swords and a land mound as a fortress behind it to the atomic bomb. It only took 85 years to go from the Wright brothers at Kitty Hawk to the B-2 bomber all over the world. Are we a sustainable species with our escalation of violence? While the Bible reveals human civilization's escalation of violence, the Bible offers an alternative way to save us from our sin. We, the world, crucified the witness to nonviolent resistance. But the wounded Christ, pictured here, was raised by God. God put his stamp of approval on the way of Jesus, the way of love, the way of nonviolent resistance to the human empire's ways. And the one who was violently crucified by us and raised by God taught us to love our enemies. That is the way of nonviolent resistance. Why didn't Jesus just say, love the resident immigrant in your land, as Leviticus taught? Why didn't just Jesus say, love your neighbor as yourself, as Leviticus taught? Why didn't Jesus just say, love everybody? Why did he say, love your enemies? I think Jesus knew that if we truly practiced nonviolent resistance to our culture of domination and vengeance and violence and persecution, the culture wouldn't give in. We would be resisted, and we would make enemies of those in control who rely on violence to hold power. But the loving, nonviolent resistance, the way Jesus, the way of the people of the way who follow Jesus even today, is the only way we can truly love our enemies. And it is, I believe, our only hope for salvation in this escalating violence of our world that is unsustainable. It's the only way of hope for prospering of and even the survival of our human species.